Hey friends, and welcome back to the Alex Makes VR podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be answering a listener's question. The question comes from Charles, and it is, how do you set your rate card? So I'll be diving into all of my thoughts on that in this episode. If you've got a question or a subject you'd like me to tackle in future episodes, then please let me know. You can slide into my DMs on Instagram and Twitter. It's Alex Makes VR. And every single week when these episodes go live, I also send out a newsletter Monday mornings, which include the tips and tricks from the episode and sometimes a bit of extra actionable advice. You can sign up for the newsletter at alexmakesvr.com. So, rate cards. Now, I have done other episodes about what you should be charging for your work, so you can go back and listen to those. But it's always good to cover this ground because I know a lot of people, whether they're just starting out or whether they've been in the industry for a while, people still get quite clammy over what to charge and feel a bit icky about picking a number. So let me just tell you straight how I picked my rate back when I first started freelancing in the VR industry. I just picked a number and I started charging it. Now, the context that I had at the time was that I had already had a career in television, so I already knew what the kind of going rates were in that industry. I then transitioned over into freelancing in the advertising and commercial kind of corporate sector with the creative agencies. So I kind of knew the going rates for a freelancer who was like a self-shooting DOP or an editor or a freelance producer. I already knew what the kind of rates were. I also had experience working in-house at production companies as a contractor, so I knew what production companies were charging. So I knew for me, in England, in the UK, the kind of work that I was going to be doing, although it was going to be totally different because it was going to be 360 in VR rather than just traditional film and photos. I don't know why I said photos. I've literally never worked as a photographer, but you get the point. Although it was a different industry, I knew vaguely what people were charging for their creative services. So in the UK, anywhere between kind of 350 to 800 pounds or euros or dollars was kind of average. And I knew that people that were operating from their own production companies were charging on the higher end. So the last production company that I worked in-house with as a contractor was charging around $650 a day. So I knew, coming out of that experience, I knew that I didn't want to go into the freelance world before I set up my own company charging less than $600, because the way I saw it was like, well, I'm doing the exact same work. It's just that I'm not under this umbrella of a production company. Why? I've always found that a bit strange. I've always thought it was a bit weird that people would kind of charge less when they're operating under their own name versus charging operating under a production company name. I've always found that really bizarre. Now, of course, like when you're working for a production company that has employees and overheads and offices, etc., all of a sudden you start to be able to kind of justify, I guess, that price in your own head. But that's exactly the point, is it's just justifying it to yourself. And that's my next point, is that with rate cards, you just kind of have to pick a number and you just kind of have to pick something that feels good for you. I was very used to charging in that range of kind of 500 to 600 before I went out on my own, like going direct to customers, because I'd already worked in the creative industries. I'd already worked my way up a bit. I already had a network. I already had a little bit of kind of, I guess, of a portfolio, not in this industry, not in 360 or VR, but I had a bit of portfolio behind me. I had some credits behind me that would probably have justified being a bit more expensive than the average freelancer. But the truth is, it was just because I didn't want to work for less. And that's the thing. I know people who are as experienced as me and as, have done as much portfolio work as me that could earn them a really nice day rate, but they choose to keep their day rates low, more on the kind of 300 to 400 range, because they prefer to be busy. Like, I've got a friend who would literally rather work every single day of the week and charge less so that he can be really busy, rather than charging a much higher ticket price and having to spend more of his time chasing bigger clients. Because that's the thing, as soon as you start charging more, of course, you're going to have to go after slightly bigger companies, because ultimately what comes with that price point is more risk, more responsibility. As soon as you start charging more for your services, there is an expectation there that you are going to be the best. You know, nowadays, when I charge for work, which is, you know, it's more than what I was charging when I first started out, there comes a huge amount of responsibility where people expect me to deliver to a very, very high standard. When I work on projects that are 5 to 6 figures, there is an expectation there that those projects will deliver a return on those investments. So I have to be on the top of my game to not only deliver my skill set, but also make sure that my clients are implementing the project properly so that they can actually get a return on their investment. I'm not just rocking up and doing my job. That's the difference between someone that charges less and more. When you're charging more, you are expected to be more proactive. You have to be a leader, a strategist. You have to be able to speak and communicate the language of your customers and clients. You have to almost be an expert in their business as well as your own, because it's now no longer about how well you understand the mechanics of a camera. It's now about how well do you know the implementation of your final product. If you're selling a virtual tour, if you're charging on the lower end, then yeah, maybe the expectation is that you're just going to go and take some gorgeous photos because you are really highly skilled in that and deliver this final project. But actually, if you're charging like a higher amount, then maybe you're expected to deliver the virtual tour that comes with, you know, virtual tours are my speciality. So sorry if I butcher the language here, but maybe you're expected to deliver it already kind of coded and ready to be embedded on a website. Maybe you deliver it in a slightly different format so that your client can literally use that URL straight away. Maybe you're expected to deliver in 3 different formats so that they can use it on their website. They can take some of the photos and use it on Facebook. Maybe you deliver with them a kind of a follow-up support guide about how to implement. Maybe you check in with them a month after to make sure that they're implementing it and they're tracking the results of it so that you understand how well it's performing for them. All of these extra things that start to justify your higher ticket price, because ultimately when you're charging more, you need to make sure that your clients are being rewarded for that. If you're charging $5,000 for a virtual tour that even 6 months ago you would have been charging $500 for, well, that company is going to be a lot bigger because they're going to have a lot more cash to be able to spend $5,000 on a virtual tour. But then also they need to they probably will have had like a strategy to roll that out, and they need to be making sure that they're getting at least making that money back, at least making $5,000 back on that investment. Do you see what I mean? So as soon as you start charging more, just be aware that the risk, the responsibility, the expectation of you goes way, way up. And if you start charging a lot of money and not delivering to that kind of standard, well, then that's when you get into tricky territory and potentially your reputation's on the line. And that's where you have to kind of weigh things up in your own head. Do you want to charge less and just have less responsibility, less risk, just be able to show up, do what you love, deliver the final product and then walk away and then on to the next one? Or do you like the challenge? Do you like that kind of pressure? I mean, me personally, I now work with such a select few clients that when I'm doing a project, I am stressed out of my mind. The pressure is intense. It's insane, the amount of pressure I'm under. But that's because I'm working on such a high level that actually I now do maybe 2-3 projects a year. And then And then I can just chill. I'm never just chilling, just FYI. But you get my point. So pick your poison. Do you want to work a little bit more and charge less for your work and, have to have a few more projects on the go with less risk? Or do you want to work on bigger, more high profile, but less projects? And know that when you are working, it's going to be pretty intense. Now, that's just my experience, of course. Everyone's going to have their own opinion and their own experience with working at different kind of levels. But in my opinion, that's the difference. It's not, okay, I've been working in the industry for 5 years now, and even though my skill level hasn't massively changed, I'm just going to start charging more. You could do it like that. But if I'd done that, then I'd probably only just now be charging like £500-600 pounds a day. And the reality is, as soon as I went into this industry, I just started high and have increased ever since. And the other thing is just knowing that rate cards, although they're good for you to kind of set in your mind how much you're charging. Really, you should be charging a project fee to the client. It's much easier to say, okay, this whole package is going to cost you $3,000 rather than, oh, this whole project is going to take 10 days at $300. So that's going to cost you like $3,000. As soon as you start putting a time limit on it, your client then, it's a very weird psychological kind of thing. And maybe I could do a whole episode on this, is psychologically your client will be, I don't know, sometimes they can expect more, or they can try and squeeze more into that time frame, because if you say it's going to take about 10 days and that's why you're charging $3,000, but you deliver it in 5, they're going to go, hang on a second. Well, some of them will be. Some of them will be saying, hang on a second. Does this mean that this is only going to cost me $1,500 now? And you don't want to get into that habit of letting clients think that there is a correlation between things taking longer and quality, because in my mind, those two things are like the opposite. I think, sometimes when you pay premium, you expect to get it done faster because that person is such an expert, so well versed in their craft, so skilled that they can deliver very quickly. Does that make sense? I hope so. Anyway, I hope that these thoughts were kind of useful on the subject of rate cards. Again, have a look at some of the other episodes that I've done on the subject of charging for your work. And the truth is, just get out there and do it. Just get out there, pick a number, see how you go with it. And you can always increase, you can always decrease. You might not be able to do that with the same client, but when you're just getting started, or when you're just kind of working out what fits right for your lifestyle and your business, it's all trial and error. So don't overthink it. Don't let this stop you from getting out there and putting in the work and just getting started. Pick a rate somewhere. If you're in England, if you're just getting started, somewhere in the realm of kind of if you're just getting started, maybe between $200 and $350 a day. If you're more experienced, then don't be afraid to skirt up more towards the kind of, I don't know. I mean, again, it's so individual. I don't even really want to kind of give this advice, but, push more towards the kind of 400 to 600 range. And again, that's for you personally to work out roughly what you're going to charge, but you should always try, if possible, to be charging a project fee rather than a day rate, if pos. Okay, stopping there, because I could literally talk about this subject forever. If you enjoyed this episode, then please consider giving it a 5-star rating if you're listening on Apple. Also, very exciting news. I launched some merch for the podcast, which was basically just a bucket list thing that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to create a little merch line that I believed in and that I designed myself. So if you've gotten any value over the last 6 months from the podcast and you just feel like supporting me and supporting the podcast, and also just rocking a bit of what I think is pretty sweet merch, then you can head over to the merch store. The link will be in the show notes of this episode. It'll also be on all of my social medias, so you can always go check it out there. But absolutely no pressure. Appreciate it's really hard times right now. And also, if this is the first kind of couple of times you've been hearing my voice, then absolutely go, don't buy the merch, go get more value from the podcast, go actually get out there, implement the advice. That's more valuable to me than you buying a t-shirt. Go and take this advice and create the life that you love for yourself. Go create the business, create the freedom that you deserve. And then in future, if you feel like supporting, you can rock a bit of the sweet merch. For those of you who do buy something from the merch store, I will be hosting a private group coaching call or masterclass in December. So watch out for announcements about that. But again, no pressure. That's it from me this week. If you've got future subjects or topics, again, that you want me to cover in future episodes, then please do reach out to me on social media, Alex Makes VR on Instagram and Twitter. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are in the world, and I'll speak to you next week.